How do you deal with setting prices for friends versus regular clients? That's George Farron asks that. That's a great question. Honesty. You have to be honest. Sometimes you can't take the gig because you got too much other work. Sometimes it's not that thrilling to you. And frankly, if I'm going to do a job for a friend, I would like to have fun doing it if I'm going to do it as a freebie. Or there are some friends of mine I'll build almost anything for. I mean, just because they ask. I just had that. A friend of mine reached out and said, hey, do you know how I'd make this little object? And I was like, I could make that for you. And they thought it would be like 20, 30 minutes of my time having it farmed out. And I ended up doing it myself. It took about 3 or 4 hours. And that person was like, all right, I didn't really want you to spend all this time. And I'm like, no. I wanted to make this. I'm really happy with the object that I made. You take it, you run with it. I'm totally chill about that. But you got to be honest with yourself and with the friend. Because whenever you're mixing friends and business, things can get really hairy in a hurry. And that's, it's fraught to do business with friends. It is also really fun and amazing, and it requires being very careful because, like with most of the, one of the financial lessons I told my sons is when more than $200 is at stake, about 80% of humans go clinically insane. Like there's no actual rationality in the room when more than a couple $100 is at stake. I just really found that around people in all sorts of fascinating ways. And so my wife and I have learned over the years, business with friends, it's just better to do it with great circumspection. And regular clients may actually get a better deal from you than a friend if they're worth it. That could also be the case. The Real Malky says, I prefer to work slowly to avoid mistakes. Excellent plan. But there are a few customers who want their item in a few days. How would you calculate the extra charge for the urgency factor? This is when you make the good, fast, cheap triangle. And if you don't know this, you're welcome, because this is something every freelancer, every human should know. Good, fast, cheap. There are the 3 corners of the triangle. You can always choose 2, but you can never have all 3. You can have it good and fast, but it won't be cheap. You can have it good and cheap, but it won't be fast. You can have it fast and cheap, and it won't be good. All that is like so freaking true. So there is a cost increase to increasing your speed, and you have to take into account not just the fact that you're increasing your speed, but maybe you're going to increase a mistake, and that's also going to cost you in terms of time and money. It's a terrific question. But suffice to say that when you say, look, I have a process, and for me to do this takes a couple of weeks, and they say, I want it in a week, you say, well, I'm going to have to add a rush fee for this, because it's going to, anything that changes your normal working routine should be something that you're charging for. Yeah. Anything that changes, if you have to work out of your shop, or you've got to, all of those things like matter in terms of how you bid that gig. I know you're hoping maybe for a more specific formula, but I don't have one, because there are no formulas in this. It's all interpersonal relationships, which means it's really fraught. And, this is why it's really good to compare notes with other professionals doing similar things, which is why it's really good to go looking for that community of people that do that, and talking to them about it. That's how you come up with the formulas that work for you. And that's really the thing that I guess I'm getting at with all of this is you have a way that you like to work. You should be bidding on jobs so that you get to do more of the fun stuff that you like to do. And that's rarely going to be the case, but as long as you're trying to keep an eye on that, then, I have always said in regards to employment, like working for other people, that it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you are, doing web design or hosting Mythbusters, 90% of your job is going to be drudgery. 90% of model making that I did in all the years that I did it was tedious in the extreme, like making 100 of these things and gluing them and painting them and making sure they're all dry and then messing one up and having to start from scratch. 90% of all jobs is drudgery, and freelance is no different. But the same holds true that if you do that drudgery well and you are able to make it work, i.e. you're able to do it in the time that your employer wants or that the client wants, then about 10 to 20% of the time you get to do what you want and you get to do the really fun stuff. And that is what makes it all worth it, in my opinion. But I don't think there's any difference between freelance work and employment work in terms of the drudgery. I mean, you have a lot more control over your schedule. That is true. You don't have to drive somewhere else. That is huge. But still, you're not building the stuff you want to build. You're building stuff for somebody else. And that also is like, you can think of the cost that you charge as a bribe for giving up your shop to go build something for someone else. That's another metric that you could look at. Have you turned down jobs solely because not enough money was offered? Yes, I totally have. And there's something that's happened to me each time I have messed something up. So one of the very first things I ever did in film was I art directed my friend Davey's student film, and it went and won an award for art direction at the film festival. It was really exciting. And then another friend of mine, I won't tell this this is an exhausting and horrifying story. But basically the next job I did after art directing Davey's film was for another friend, and I messed that job up so badly, I lost that friend. Like, it's still one of the worst things that I've ever done, and that like happened because of something that I did. I'm still sad about it. And about a year after that, a up-and-coming storyboard artist who worked in Hollywood was going to cut their teeth on their own film. They had a short film they wanted to make. A mutual friend set us up, and they sent me the script, and it involved this very complicated set of special effects using both miniature model work and full-size work and some green screen. And this is like 1987. And I looked at this and I understood how to do this job, but I also knew now to look for the places in which I was gonna get in over my head. The job I did for that friend I lost, I was in over my head from the get-go. And now, professionally, a year later, I was wary to take note of where I would get in the same weeds again. And I realized I can't execute this film for this guy on my own. And so I called him up, I met with him, and I said, here's how I would do all of these things, but the problem is I can't do these alone. I would need to bring in someone else. It would cost this much. And they didn't have the budget for that, and that job went away. Now, I'm totally clear that if I had actually executed that job, which is possible, plausible that I could have done it, my whole life might be quite different, right? Like that guy, I haven't followed up on him, but maybe he's went on to make a bunch of movies and I could have been his production designer. That's that whole kind of path that could take place at a moment like that. But I don't regret turning that job down at all. Because I didn't turn it down, sorry. I just explained the parameters under which I could execute it, and that wasn't acceptable to the client, so they went with someone else, which is fine. But this is the longest way of me telling you that each time you come to a new bit of institutional knowledge, when you apply that, I've kept finding that I would be applying the institutional knowledge about what I could and could not tolerate in a job, and the very next job that would come in, I would not be able to accept, or it would go away. And that's, again, like that's a process of maturation. The fact that they're offering money in and of itself isn't enough to take the job. Not if it's not worth your time. Not if it's not what the market will bear. Not if they're getting a ridiculous deal from your labor and sweat equity. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us even further, you can by becoming a tested member. Details are, of course, below, but it includes all sorts of perks, and we're building them all the time. You get advanced word and behind-the-scenes photos of some of our projects. Questions, you get to ask direct questions during my live streams, and we have some members-only videos, including the Adam real-time series of unbroken, unedited shots of me working here in the shop. They are weirdly meditative. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you on the next one.